Amanda Johnson walked into the traditional dojo, her white GI and yellow belt catching the skeptical gazes of the black belt instructors who stood watching her. To them, she appeared like just another beginner, probably someone who'd never experienced real martial arts, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. What they didn't know was that Amanda wasn't just a simple student. She was a seasoned fighter, and they were about to find out just how wrong they were. Afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the dojo as Amanda pushed open the heavy glass doors. At 42, she carried herself with quiet confidence, though her movements were deliberate and understated. Her dark hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail, and she wore a crisp white gi with a neatly tied yellow belt around her waist. To an outsider, she might have looked like just another person looking for a fitness class, or someone hoping to try out martial arts for a hobby. But she wasn't there to play games. She had just moved to the suburban town 3 weeks ago, searching for a fresh start. Her life before had been far too complicated, too demanding. She hoped to find peace here, to reconnect with herself and rediscover her love for martial arts in a simpler setting. She had called ahead and been told that walk-ins were welcome during the afternoon sessions. When she entered, several students in white GIs were already training, their movements sharp and focused. Amanda stood back and observed. As she watched them, her practiced eyes noted their techniques, their stances, and their breathing patterns. It had been 2 years since she last stepped into a dojo, but the muscle memory she'd built over the years never truly faded. She was about to enter a new dojo, but she knew all too well how easily assumptions were made about people based on appearance. She had seen it before, and she knew it would happen again today. "Can I help you?" a voice called from across the room. Amanda turned and saw a stocky man in his mid-40s walking toward her. He wore a perfectly clean white gi with a black belt adorned with golden embroidery, his stern expression showing that he was used to being in control. This had to be one of the senior instructors. "I'm interested in joining your classes," Amanda replied politely. "I just moved to the area and was hoping to get back into training." The man gave her a once-over, his eyes lingering on her yellow belt with visible skepticism. "I'm Brad Hoffman, head instructor here. What's your experience level?" "I have some background," Amanda said modestly, not wanting to reveal too much. "It's been a while, but I'm hoping to shake off the rust." Brad didn't seem impressed. He eyed her yellow belt and said, "Yellow belt, huh? What style did you study before?" "Mixed training," Amanda replied, keeping her answer vague. Over the years, she had learned that being too specific about her martial arts background often led to unwanted questions and assumptions. Another instructor joined them, Carlos Rivera, a lean man with dark features and a black belt with similar golden details. He nodded to Amanda as he introduced himself. "New student, potentially?" Brad asked, glancing at Carlos. "She says she has some background," he added, emphasizing the words with barely concealed amusement. Amanda could feel the subtle judgment already starting to creep in, but she wasn't surprised. It was something she'd encountered time and time again in her martial arts journey, preconceived notions that she had to prove wrong. Brad crossed his arms, studying Amanda more closely. "Well, I suppose we could let you observe today," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Let's see if you can keep up with our training standards." "Thank you," Amanda replied, trying to keep her voice even. But she could feel her jaw tightening in frustration. The male instructors exchanged looks, their smirks barely hiding their dismissiveness. Carlos added, "We were just about to work on some advanced sparring techniques, nothing you'd be ready for, obviously, but it might give you an idea of what we expect here." Amanda's eyes flashed with a brief glint of anger, but she maintained her composure. She wasn't here for a confrontation, But she knew how this would play out. She wasn't just going to stand by and let them disrespect her. "I understand," she said, her voice calm. "I'll just watch." Brad nodded approvingly, clearly pleased that he thought she would sit quietly and be impressed. "Good choice," he said. "Martial arts isn't like those cardio kickboxing classes at the gym. This is traditional karate. It requires real discipline, real strength. Not everyone is cut out for it." He gestured to a group of male students who were stretching nearby. "These guys have been training for years to reach this level. It's not something you just pick up as a hobby." Carlos added with a patronizing smile, "Maybe you should consider starting with our beginners class on Tuesday evenings. It's mostly housewives looking for light exercise. Might be more your speed." Amanda felt heat rising in her chest, but forced herself to remain calm. She had encountered this attitude countless times before. The assumption that because of her age, her gender, or her modest appearance, she couldn't possibly have the skills they were talking about. What they didn't know was that she had spent the last 15 years mastering techniques they'd never even heard of. "I'll keep that in mind," she replied, keeping her tone civil despite the simmering irritation inside. Brad turned to address his students. "All right, everyone, let's show our visitor what real karate looks like," he said. "Carlos and I will demonstrate some advanced combinations." As the two instructors moved to the center of the mat, Amanda settled herself onto a bench along the wall. She watched them with professional interest, noting their form, timing, and their obvious pride in showing off their skills to someone they assumed had never trained a day in her life. They were competent, she had to admit, solid techniques, proper stances, but there was something too performative about it. They seemed more interested in impressing the crowd than in teaching. The demonstration continued for 20 minutes, with Brad and Carlos showing increasingly complex combinations. Their movements were precise, their strikes powerful, but they didn't seem to be teaching. They were just displaying their abilities. It wasn't a demonstration of martial arts for the sake of education. It was a performance to prove how skilled they were. When they finished, Brad stood tall, a smug expression on his face. "That's how it's done at the professional level," he said, barely breaking a sweat. "Takes years to develop that kind of control and precision. Very impressive," Amanda acknowledged genuinely, though her eyes betrayed a slight, knowing glint. She appreciated skill when she saw it, even when it came wrapped in arrogance. Carlos wiped sweat from his forehead with a towel, still caught up in his performance. "Most people don't realize how much dedication real martial arts requires," he said. "It's not just physical, it's mental, spiritual. You have to completely reshape how you think about conflict and control." "I imagine so," Amanda replied quietly, her voice steady, giving nothing away. Brad's gaze narrowed as he eyed her again, clearly sizing her up. "So, what exactly is your background?" he asked, his voice hinting at suspicion. Amanda hesitated. She had hoped to ease into her training without explaining her history, but she could see where this was headed. Amanda paused for a moment before answering. She could feel the weight of their skepticism pressing on her, but she was no stranger to being underestimated. The moment she stepped into the dojo, she knew it wouldn't be easy. These instructors were like many she'd encountered before, too proud to see beyond the surface, too eager to assert dominance. But she had nothing to prove, except to herself and to the students who deserved better. "I've trained in a variety of disciplines," she replied, her voice steady and calm. "I've had experience in karate, jiu-jitsu, and Muay Thai. But I'm here to train, not to talk about myself." Brad's eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "Oh, so you've been around, huh? Let's see if you can keep up." He exchanged a glance with Carlos, who smirked and stepped back. Brad turned toward the students, who were still watching with increasing curiosity. "All right, everyone, get ready for some real martial arts," Brad said, his voice filled with condescension. He moved into the center of the mat with Carlos, Preparing for another round of complex techniques, Amanda remained on the bench, observing them carefully. She studied their movements, noting their rhythm, their techniques, the subtle flaws in their posture. She was a strategist, not a show-off. She wasn't interested in competing with their egos. She was focused on learning and on challenging their limited view of what a martial artist could look like. As Brad and Carlos moved through their demonstration, Amanda felt a familiar calm settle over her. She wasn't nervous, she wasn't worried. This was her element. She had spent years refining her skills, becoming fluent in the language of martial arts. In that language, the yellow belt she wore meant nothing. Her belt, like everyone else's, was just a piece of cloth. What mattered was the discipline, the dedication, the understanding of the art, and the respect you gave to others. When they finished their demonstration, Brad turned to Amanda, his face flushed with pride. "You see," he said, breathing heavily, but looking satisfied with himself. "This is what it takes. It's not something you can just pick up. It takes years of commitment." Amanda stood slowly, her movements fluid, controlled. She glanced at the students who had gathered, noticing the subtle shifts in their posture, the curiosity in their eyes. They were starting to understand, but what they didn't know was that they were about to witness a different kind of demonstration. "I appreciate the demonstration," Amanda said politely, "but I think I'm ready for something more practical." Brad chuckled, clearly thinking she was bluffing. "Oh, ready for a sparring match already, huh?" "Yes," Amanda replied, her tone unwavering. "I think it's time for a demonstration of my own." The air in the dojo seemed to thicken with tension. The students leaned in, eyes wide with anticipation. Brad and Carlos exchanged another glance, and Amanda could see the shift in their demeanor. They had underestimated her, and now they were about to find out what that felt like. Carlos, still unsure of what was happening, stepped forward. "You really want to spar with us?" he asked, trying to sound confident but clearly rattled. "We're not going to go easy on you just because you're a woman." Amanda's lips curled slightly at his words, but she remained calm. "I'm not asking for anyone to go easy on me. I'm asking you to respect me as a martial artist," Brad snorted, his face twisted with arrogance. "All right then, lady. Let's see what you've got." Amanda didn't waste time. She moved toward the center of the mat, assuming a relaxed but ready stance. She wasn't in a hurry. She knew exactly what she was doing. As Brad lunged at her, Amanda stepped aside with a fluid movement, evading his attack with ease. She didn't block his punch. She simply let it miss, flowing around him like water. The movement was graceful but precise, and it caught Brad off guard. He stumbled, recovering quickly but clearly surprised. "That was a lucky move," he muttered, under his breath, trying to regain his composure, but his confidence was already starting to crack. Carlos, who had been watching the exchange closely, finally stepped in. "Brad, take it easy," he called out, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. It was clear that he was beginning to realize that Amanda wasn't the novice they'd assumed. Brad, however, wasn't about to back down. He attacked again, this time with a series of rapid punches. He was fast, but Amanda was faster. She slipped, past each strike with minimal movement, her body flowing like a shadow around his attacks. She wasn't trying to show off. She was simply doing what she'd spent years perfecting. "Hold on," Carlos called out again, his voice sharp now. "How did you move like that?" Amanda didn't answer him immediately. She was too focused on Brad's movements. She could see his frustration growing with each missed strike, each failed attempt to land a blow. It was almost as if the more he tried, the more it seemed like she was toying with him. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Brad demanded, his breathing becoming heavier. Amanda's answer was simple, almost casual. "Various places." Carlos looked at her, confusion still evident on his face. "You're supposed to be a beginner." "I'm not a beginner," Amanda said calmly. I've been training for years, and I've learned that appearances can be deceiving. The students who had gathered around the mat began to murmur, exchanging looks with one another. Sarah, the young woman who had tried to stand up for Amanda earlier, watched with wide eyes. She could see the disparity now, the difference between the two instructors' bravado and Amanda's quiet power. Brad, now visibly sweating and clearly beginning to lose his composure, launched another series of attacks. His strikes were wild, fueled by frustration and overconfidence, but Amanda remained calm, absorbing the pressure with effortless control. She redirected his energy rather than meeting it head-on, smoothly countering his moves without breaking a sweat. "This isn't possible," Carlos muttered, clearly stunned. "Yellow belts don't move like that." Amanda's eyes remained focused on Brad. With a sudden move, she caught his wrist mid-punch, using his own momentum to spin him off balance. For a moment, he was completely vulnerable. The dojo fell, silent as everyone watched. Amanda could have finished the fight in an instant. Her move would have easily ended it, but she didn't. Instead, she let him go, stepping back with a calm, composed expression. Brad, gasping for breath, and now, completely embarrassed, straightened up and tried to salvage his dignity. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger. Amanda's response was simple: "Showing you what I can do." The room was still silent. Brad's face was flushed with frustration, his ego bruised beyond repair. He had spent the entire demonstration trying to prove himself, trying to humiliate her, only to be outclassed at every turn. "I'm just getting started," Amanda added, her voice soft but firm. The dojo was completely still now, the silence thick and uncomfortable. Brad was breathing hard, his face flushed with exertion, but more so with embarrassment. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, glancing at Carlos, who was still trying to process what had just happened. The instructors, who had been so sure of themselves only moments before, now stood bewildered, their confidence shattered in a way they never anticipated. Amanda, meanwhile, remained composed. Her breathing was steady, her posture relaxed. It was clear to everyone in the room now that she wasn't just a beginner, and her movements weren't those of someone trying to prove something to anyone. She was simply someone who had mastered her craft over years of dedication and respect for the art. What they had mistaken for arrogance was just the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of. "Brad," Carlos muttered, his voice strained. "This is ridiculous." Amanda folded her arms across her chest, her gaze never wavering from the two instructors. She wasn't interested in winning or losing. She was simply teaching them a lesson they hadn't been expecting, one that wasn't about physical power, but about the respect that was the foundation of martial arts. Carlos took a step toward her, the arrogance in his stance still present, though now there was a hint of uncertainty. "You think this is a game? You're playing with fire." Amanda gave him a small, knowing smile. "I'm not playing at all," she said, her voice steady. "You two were the ones who treated me like I didn't belong here. Now you're learning the hard way that appearances can be deceiving." Sarah, who had been watching from the sidelines, seemed to have found a new strength within herself. She stepped forward, a determined expression on her face. "She's right. You can't just go around assuming someone doesn't belong. What kind of teachers are you?" Brad, now visibly rattled, pointed a finger at Sarah. "You don't understand what this place is about. We've worked hard to get where we are. We've earned our status." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Earned?" she repeated, her voice a little louder this time. "You don't earn respect by belittling others. You earn it through your actions, your character, and your ability to lead by example. The only thing you've demonstrated today is your own insecurity." The room was quiet again, the students exchanging glances with one another. This time, the murmurings were not of judgment, but of acknowledgement. Amanda's words carried weight, and they felt like a long overdue truth. Brad took a deep breath. trying to regain some of his lost composure. "You've got a lot of nerve," he said, his voice wavering. But even as he spoke, the confidence he once had seemed to slip away, leaving behind only the remnants of a fragile ego. "You came here playing some game, making us look bad. Why?" "I came here," Amanda said, her eyes narrowing slightly, "to see if I could train. I didn't come here to make anyone look bad. But you gave me no choice. You treated me as less than, and now you're getting a taste of what it's like to be dismissed because of something you have no control over." The students, who had been listening closely to every word, now stood taller. They had all witnessed something profound, something that went beyond the physical demonstration of skill. It was a reminder of the importance of respect and integrity in martial arts and in life itself. Carlos looked toward the students, trying to assert some authority, but it was clear that his earlier confidence had evaporated. "This is not how things are supposed to go," he muttered under his breath, but Amanda could see the cracks in his facade. He was no longer the confident instructor he had been at the beginning of the day. He was just a man who'd been caught in his own pride. "I don't think you understand what it means to be a real martial artist," Amanda said, her voice softer now, but still strong. "It's not about dominating the weak. It's about protecting those who need help, lifting them up and teaching them with patience, respect and humility." Brad and Carlos stood frozen, the weight of her words sinking in. They had spent so much of their careers building up their reputations, making sure their authority was never questioned. But Amanda had shown them something far more powerful than authority. It was the power of respect earned through skill, grace, and kindness. Amanda took a step back, letting the lesson hang in the air for a moment, before turning to the students who had gathered around the mat. She could see the spark of realization in their eyes. They weren't looking at her with judgment anymore. They were looking at her with respect. "I'm not here to tear you down," Amanda said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "But I am here to remind you of something important. True martial arts isn't about humiliating people. It's about lifting them up. We're all students, no matter our rank, and we all have something to learn." She turned back to Brad and Carlos. "You've both failed in your duty as instructors today. You've forgotten that the essence of martial arts is to build others up, not tear them down. I came in here hoping to learn, and instead you made me your target." The silence that followed was deafening. Brad opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was trying to find a way to salvage his pride, but it was already too late. The students had seen the truth. Carlos, still standing at the edge of the mat, looked at Amanda with a mixture of disbelief and resentment. "You've embarrassed us," he said, his voice low. "That wasn't the point of this." "Then what was the point?" Amanda asked, her voice cool. "Was it to prove how superior you are? Or was it to show that you can break someone down for your own amusement?" She took one last look at the room, at the students who were now looking at her with new respect. "I came here to train. I came here to grow. But now I see that this is not the place for me. I won't stay where I'm not respected." As she picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder, Amanda glanced one last time at Brad and Carlos. "I'll be in Memorial Park tomorrow at 7 a.m. If anyone here wants to learn what true martial arts is all about, respect, discipline, and genuine strength, come find me. I'll be waiting." With that, she turned and walked out of the dojo, leaving behind a room full of students who would never forget the lesson she'd taught them. The lesson wasn't in the punches and kicks. It was in the power of quiet confidence, humility, and respect for others. Outside, Amanda felt the cool breeze against her face. She had come here hoping for peace, for a fresh start, and now she was leaving with something even more valuable, the knowledge that no matter what anyone said or thought, she had stayed true to herself. The next morning, Memorial Park was quiet and peaceful, the sun just beginning to rise. A small group of people had gathered, most of them from the dojo, including Sarah, Marcus, and David, who had all witnessed Amanda's demonstration. Even Mrs. Chen, the older woman who had been turned away months earlier, had come to join. Amanda arrived right on time, dressed simply in workout clothes, with nothing flashy or extravagant. Her presence, however, was commanding. There were no belts to display her rank, no audience to impress, just a group of students eager to learn. She stood before them, a figure of quiet strength. True martial arts, Amanda began, addressing the group, isn't about proving you're better than others. It's about becoming the best version of yourself while helping others do the same. Her words were simple, but they carried an undeniable weight. The students listened attentively, taking in her message not just with their ears, but with their hearts. As she led them through a series of movements, Amanda's teaching wasn't about flashy techniques or difficult drills. It was about focus, control, and respecting the art. She emphasized discipline, patience, and the importance of growing together. This wasn't about defeating others. It was about mastering oneself. For Amanda, martial arts wasn't just a physical practice. It was a way of life. As the class ended, Sarah looked around at the others, feeling a new sense of respect for Amanda and for martial arts itself.